Hi, my name is Fred. Welcome to the Epic Endurance Podcast, where we take a deep dive into strength, endurance, and conditioning. I am the head coach at Yousuli. Today we are going to talk about strength training and programming for endurance athletes, how to do it, what's it for, and also talk about some exercises. First thing to address is, what is strength training? Strength training is often referred to as kind of resistance training or any kind of exercises that are improving the power, resistance, and stability of the body. What it is not necessarily is muscle growth. I think a lot of people equate strength training with taking muscle, and hypertrophic training that is made to increase muscle size is a part of strength training, but it revolves at training at certain and specific intensities. Most of endurance athletes that do undergo strength training do not take much muscle mass. It's not because you're lifting weight for the first time or you're doing this 2 times or 3 times a week for a year that your body shape is going to change. If anything, it might just improve body composition by improving your metabolic rate, firming up your body by decreasing slightly your body fat percentage. So the ratio of muscle mass and fat mass that you have on your body might change a little bit, but do not expect that you will have significant muscle growth unless you're targeting specific intensities. Strength training is essential for athletes as it helps in many ways. First and foremost, it helps in preventing injuries by stabilizing certain structures, might be your knees or your shoulders or your elbows or your feet. Strength training exercise will prevent certain kind of injuries that occur during swimming, cycling, and running. For example, a lot of athletes that do swim with either improper technique or with improper muscular endurance might suffer shoulder injuries with a lot of mileage. Now, of course, technique is important, but technique can only work when basic stability and strength are there. And that is the first thing that strength training will address, is developing this stability that will prevent injuries to surface. Now, you have to understand also that the faster you go, especially in running, the higher the demands might be on your body to stabilize things. It's much easier to stabilize your hips. Let's say if you run at 5 minutes per kilometer, than it is if you are running at 3 minutes per kilometer. And you can see in gaits, athletes with poor strength will have their gait change at higher intensities, especially when they go at intensities that are above their threshold. So in this sense, strength training also offers a support to allow yourself to go at faster paces or endure faster efforts without having this strain. Strength training can also complement through that higher intensity session. One of the main reasons why athletes cannot do higher intensity training like VO2 training or power training is because their muscular endurance fails before their cardiovascular system fails. So their ability to resist demands again are not good enough, and therefore they're not able to reach their cardiovascular potential because the muscle and muscular utilization is not done properly. Number 2 is when strength training. I think for most endurance athletes, doing 2 to 3 sessions of strength training per week is what is generally advised. Some athletes might want to do more, and some athletes are coming from a gym background, strength training background, and want to maintain. There needs to be a balance, and you need to personally think about what is the most important for you. If the endurance sport is the most important for you, then make sure that the amount of strength training you do complements it, but does not take away from that. Of course, this is extra time. Sessions don't have to be very long. They can be between 20-40 minutes, whether you're following a structured training plan or you're just following simple health guideline like the CDC, which will recommend 2 to 3 times of strength training per week. It is not because you do endurance training and you run and you cycle and you swim that you're gaining the benefits of this kind of strength development. They are benefits that are very specific from either lifting weight or using your body weight in specific ways, and you can target muscle that might be otherwise not utilized properly, and you can reach intensities much more safely than you would if you were to try to undergo the same intensity through running or running uphill or cycling and sprinting. How? There are many things to say, so it's not in 3 or 5 minute video, but most of the things are going to be addressed. But there are a couple of rules to follow. If you do a strength training session and the intensity is quite high and you, for example, go for a run, that might induce instability and therefore increase the risk of injury. So how you plan your session have to be based on certain factors. Through exercise you're doing, some are more challenging than others. I don't mean necessarily in terms of intensities, I mean also the way they're done. In a gym, a machine is a very, very controlled and somehow safe movement. Your movement pattern is being restricted by the machine, and the amount of weight that you have to deal with is following a very clear pathway, and it does not induce much instability. Now, instability training is important, but it creates fatigue, so you have to balance these things. If you go from machine and then you go for something like barbell training, where you're less stable because there's a bar, then you induce instability and you increase the intensities even at the same weight, and maybe somewhat the specificity. So from machine to barbell to dumbbell, or using things like rings or TRX, anything that increases the instability becomes more specific, but also can be more demanding. The intensities and number of repetition and the rest you're taking between sets should ideally be structured based on your training plan. So if you're an endurance athlete and you have an overall training plan for a race that might last 6 months, 8 months, 3 months, normally the way you would do that is you will break down this training plan in cycles. These cycles are addressing for your training different training priorities. So it might be more focused on techniques, or addressing race pace maybe later on, or doing some recovery or temper. Strength training sessions and intensities should match, ideally, these training priorities to allow your strength training sessions not to impact too much your endurance training session, but magnify the effect they have and play with this. So there are certain guidelines that usually we're trying to follow, following the number of reps and sets and the amount of rest you're taking based on your training cycle in your race preparation. How do you define the intensities? We use 1 rep max, and 1 rep max means the maximum intensity you can do for one exercise. So if you were to do 1 squat, how much weight will you be able to push or carry? Now, we usually don't ask people to try to do 1 rep max to calculate 1 rep max. So if you can do anything between 6 or 12 and fail, then we can calculate 6 reps at X intensity equals 1 rep at that intensity. So there is a small calculation that we can do. And based on this number, a bit the same way we'll use for threshold, then we can use these numbers to map out our intensity in training for each exercises. Now, of course, knowing your 1 rep max on a machine is much easier than when you're doing something with body weight, but you can try to do it. If you're using body weight, for example, you could weight yourself, and then if you're doing pull-ups, for example, and be using some elastic bands to take off a certain amount of weight out of you. If you're in a machine, pretty easy. Put 50, you do 10 sets, and you do 10 sets at 50. Very simple. Normally, when we look at strength training, we are addressing what we call the movement patterns, which are bending and lifting, like squat movement, single leg exercises like a lunge, pushing movement like anything where you're pushing with your hands, pulling movement like a pull-up, and rotational movement, any kind of spiraling movement where your body is turning to the side, and often doing a bit of core training as well. Now, most of exercise will have core. I'm not going to list all the exercises that exist because there are too many of them, and especially for this video, but I can give you some examples. So some functional movement patterns that are essential for triathlon might include hip hinges, very good exercises like deadlift or Romanian deadlift. They help with the range of motion of the arm strings, and which is essential for both running and cycling. You will have the squat movement, so the bend and lift movement, like a goblet squat, a front squat, a split squat. They improve your glute strength. I would also advise to do exercises like crab walk, which work on the gluteus medius and minimus, which stabilizes a bit the knee, but working on your glute muscle muscle will prevent or diminish the amount of movement that your knee might be having. It will improve stability in your hips and therefore your hips, knees, and ankles. Push and pull movements, your push-ups, overhead press, bench press, rows, they improve stability and posture, which is good for swimming. So your shoulder stability, they'll improve your back stability, but also benefits into running. The overall stability posture will affect the way you run and will affect the way you cycle, and obviously will impair your performance and stability in the water. Lunge, single movement, these are very important for this medial stability of the knee. So you have reverse lunges, Bulgarian split squats, step-ups, and so forth. Highly recommended doing these ones. And then core stability, things like planks, side planks, dead bugs, pull-off press, they help with your posture, they stabilize the pelvic area. Your core is going to be one of the main axes of transfer of energy between your lower body and your upper body. And if your core is not strong, then a lot of things are going to happen here. You might be swimming, cycling, or running. There is going to be some energy loss. So any kind of core work that you do is going to improve both your health and your performance. What I'm going to do right now is, for the sake of defining your strength training practice, which again I recommend 2 to 3 times per week, I'm going to show you how to calculate your 1RM and how to plan your sets, reps, and rest time. So I made a small calculator for you. It is called Strength Training Intensity Calculator. Very simple, from 1 rep max assessment to intensity targeting within your annual training plan, or ATP in some platforms, but basically the plan you have for your season. Here, you can choose from 1 to 5 exercises. Basically the same thing. You don't need to do that right now, but just for the sake of convenience, so you don't have to rewrite everything, you can do 5 exercises. Let's say you can call it whatever you want. So I'm going to call this, let's pull down. I made 10 reps at 90 kilos or 90 pounds. It doesn't matter because units on the other side will be the same thing. So, and it gives me my 1 RM, my 1 rep max at almost 120 of whatever unit I'm using. And then I can choose here whatever phase of training I am in. So general preparation, bulking, late general preparation, late base training, competition, or the late specific preparation, or the late build. As a reminder, transition is between 2 races. You might have 1 or 2 or more weeks off, and this is a good place. Here you can see the intensity is pretty low. A lower intensity, higher intensity, flexible. It's mostly about movement pattern. When you're looking at something like general preparation or the base training, which will be the first part of your training plan, we're looking at 2 to 3 sets, 12 reps with under 30 seconds rest. And with here we have quite a range of training. You don't have to hit the numbers exactly. Some machine will allow you to be just in between. Trying to target these numbers is a good thing. This will be on 1 exercises. Then you can take a rest and then move on to the next one. Bulking up. So this is what will be recommended for muscular hypertrophy, this muscle growth. An untrained male athlete might gain up to 5 kilograms or the equivalent in pounds per year. Untrained female athlete will gain a little less, maybe 3 to 4. You should not be afraid of lifting weights. You should be afraid of not lifting weights. Very, very important. Bulking up is if you want to bulk up. And hopefully this can help you plan a little bit better. And I hope that it can encourage you to reintroduce, if you're not doing it already, some strength training to your routine. There are plenty of YouTube videos. I don't have yet on Yousuli videos about every exercises, but you can find some pretty decent videos on YouTube and other streaming platforms that can showcase cues about every exercises. This is about the strength and conditioning. There might be something on the top of that. So everyone will have some issues because of muscle length, leg discrepancy, and so forth, to be prone to do movement that are not functional. And strength training, base strength training can be used as a foundation, but for some athletes will benefit also further from having specific exercises that are not necessarily at a high intensity, but addressing this little proclivities, these little issues that we may have as an individual, which comes a bit outside of the scope of basic strength training, but more into the orthopedic / biomechanical side of things. Many elite and professional athletes will work on these exercises that are low intensity and do this also maybe two times or 3 times on the top of strength training. But this again, it adds some things. If you have to add one thing, I would really recommend working first on strength training and developing a base that protects you into your endurance training. I hope that this was helpful. If you have any question, please feel free to contact me. Like always, everything is free on the website, at least the calculators. That will be it for today. Thank you for watching.